Realization Made Easy for Health, Wealth, Supply, and Self-Direction by Kate Atkinson B. Originally published in 1902, Chapter 1, Your Inner Source of Power. In my experience with patients and pupils, I find that one and all ask help for clear realization. All feel instinctively that it is essential to know truth and to feel it in every fiber of the body, for this is realization, to know and to feel truth. Let me explain simply. You can think of energy without feeling it. A very weak person can think of the tremendous forces of the universe and yet feel all the weaker himself by comparison. The feeling of power or lack of feeling must depend upon his manner of thinking of energy. If he thinks of it as outside of himself, he but accentuates his weakness. If he thinks of it as within himself, he accentuates his strength. In the first instance, he merely thinks energy, while in the latter, he feels it, and this feeling is realization. To this end, I shall in the first lesson endeavor to bring home to you the absolute truth that power or energy is within. Within what? Within the mind. From an invisible center in the mind, we all of us become visible, moving, acting entities or personalities, and what we externally become, we have previously been mentally. Keep this well in mind in your subsequent study. Remember that the process of growth is from the invisible to the visible, and that the invisible is mind and the visible is body. It is thus you are created, and thus you are recreated from moment to moment and from year to year. In the invisible realm of mind, God dwells. In fact, God is mind. That is, He is divine mind, and you and your inner real essence are one with that mind, proceeding from it towards the outer circumference of life as the ray proceeds from the sun. All things are created from a center and grow outward. You will see that process everywhere in nature. The center is usually a seed, which is a material, visible thing, but within that visible seed is an invisible center from which life springs and flows outward. That invisible center is life. It is God, the living spirit of the body of the universe. That life or God is at your center, and from it your life flows outward. God's life is also energy, the energy that substances the entire universe, yourself included. If that energy were withdrawn from the universe, all matter would instantly disappear. But such a withdrawal of energy is inconceivable, for energy simply is. It never was created, but always was, without beginning and without end. You cannot lessen the amount of energy in the universe, neither can you increase it. You can only increase or decrease its manifestation, making that manifestation sometimes more and sometimes less. Since you are one with the all-mind as the ray is one with the sun, or as the bay is one with the ocean, this energy is in your own mind, but you do not realize it. Or in other words, you do not feel it because you do not know that it is in your mind, and because you are looking for it outside of yourself. Mental things can only be taken hold of or appropriated by mental means, that is, by thought. And the only way you can take hold of energy and make it your own is by means of your thought. The hypnotist confers immense strength by making his subject believe that he has it. Through this belief, he performs tremendous feats, even though his physique be frail and his muscle weak. When he takes hold of energy with his mind, he possesses it and can use it to any extent comparable with his belief. Seeing yourself as one with the all-mind, you will then know that as energy is within you, so is goodness, wisdom, love, opulence, health, life, vitality, and you will shortly begin to manifest all this little by little, more and more. As the days roll by and your belief becomes more strongly fixed and takes a deeper hold on your life and its activities. Now, this in a word is realization, and in walking the path that leads to it, you get away from the falsities of life and you know things as they are and not as they seem. To get away from the seeming and into the reality is to begin to realize. Have you not seen a child reaching out to a bit of flickering sunshine on the floor, and have you not smiled indulgently at its baby efforts to grasp the golden plaything? Your smile is born of superior wisdom, but you are almost as ignorant of that which attracts you now as is the baby of his bit of sunshine. There was a time when you, like it, cried and kicked in childish rage because you could not grasp the sunshine in your chubby little palm, and here you are chasing it still. No longer, as in your baby days, do you creep after it, for with the growth of years you have gained the power of running, and so you follow in swift pursuit your fleck of sunshine all over the world and never grasp it. Hence it follows that you are either crabbed and embittered or saddened and melancholy from the start. The sunshine you sought was a bit of happiness, but always and ever it turned to illusion, just as your hand closed upon it. You have reached the darkness of night, the sun has set, and there is no longer the tiniest speck of sunshine to follow, so you say and think. But, O child in the house of truth, do you not know that the sun never sets to rise no more? Tomorrow is coming, and with it the sun, and if not tomorrow, then the next day or the day after. Somehow, somewhere, your sun will rise and shine whether you believe it or not. but you can never grasp sunshine in your hand. That has been your mistake. Moreover, it would do you no good if you could so grasp and hold it, for sunshine is not so made. It is fine, etheric, permeating, and life-giving, as it could not be if solid enough to hold in your hand. Correct your illusion, concentering the sunshine, and you will no longer chase it in vain. Place yourself in the right relation to it, and you will receive its delightful influx. And now look at the diagram which heads this lesson while I explain it to you. You will notice that, as the rays from the center push outward, they grow narrower until finally they reach a point. And just for the purpose of illustration, I am going to suppose that this point of the ray represents the mind of man before it opens up nearer to the divine consciousness and has greater knowledge of reality. Let the dark background stand for negation or matter, and you will see that the mind at this stage of its unfoldment has not at its command so much of the central light as it must possess when consciousness awakens in the wider and ever-widening ray as you trace it toward the center. Consciousness begins at the point of the ray where, of course, it is narrowed and limited. From this point, it gradually awakens nearer and nearer to the center, becoming wider and greater as it advances toward the center. Look at the diagram and trace consciousness from the point of the ray to its center in divinity, and you will see exactly what I mean. If consciousness is awake only at the point of the ray, then I seem to be but a small being, but with a wider consciousness comes a wider sense of being, and so on, until I come to the place where the ray joins the center, which is the place of all consciousness. At that place, you and I are seen to be one, but all along the way of consciousness we are seen to be two, and therefrom arise our distinctive relations, one with another. We act and react upon each other on the external side of life, impelled thereto by the inevitable sense of separation. All this is right and beautiful and as it should be, provided that back of it lies the knowledge of oneness of essence. Without that knowledge of unity and variety, discord rules. There is a tendency to fight for mine, in contradistinction to thine, causing unrest of mind and disease of body. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Therefore it makes a great difference in your well-being that you think aright in your heart. What does it mean to think in your heart? Does it mean more than to think in your mind? Yes, it does. To think in your heart is to realize, to feel as well as think. A great deal of the process we call thinking has no more life in it than the rattling of dry peas in a pod. Thinking in the heart is live thinking or realization. Live thinking is always based on truth. It is a delusion, and so long as it holds you in its power, you will deem yourself a weak creature indeed, a mere football to be kicked about by circumstances. A mechanical toy like the doll that cries when you touch a spring, or the horse that walks when you wind up its machinery and stops when the machinery runs down. This is dead thought, and as long as you think it, you will be what it represents you to be. Whereas, to know the truth, that you can wind up your own machinery, or better still, that you are the powerhouse behind all action and controlling it, is to think the truth, to think in the heart from whence are the issues of life. There is but one being, although there are many expressions of that being, and these expressions are called beings, and some of them are called human beings. Trace every one of these beings back to its source, and it comes from the one being in a continuous flow, not separated in the least from that with which it is one. If you can grasp this idea, though ever so faintly, you will begin to feel a greater sense of power. Consciousness will awaken at a place a little nearer to the central being, at a wider place in the ray. This ray we will call human being. It is really divine being, but its limitation in the ray makes it finite or human, distinguishing it from the Son of Infinitude being. VIII defines the oneness of man and God in the following terms: all that exists only by the communication of God's infinitude being. All that has intelligence has it only by derivation from his sovereign reason, and all that acts only from the impulse of his supreme activity. It is he who does all in all. It is he who at each moment of our life is the beating of our heart, the movement of our limbs, the intelligence of our spirit, the soul of our soul. VIII was a holy and reverent man, not in the least given to presumption, and yet see how he places God in the inmost parts of our being. We know now that it is round, and that the sky above us is under the feet of the nations on the other side of the earth, so that if God were above us, he would be below them. A foolish conception, you will admit. And yet it lingers in your mind because your ancestors in the faraway past have transmitted it from generation to generation, and it has been accepted unthinkingly. The moment you give form and location to God, you destroy the spirituality of his being, and you are as truly an idolater as the heathen who bows down to his idols of wood and stone. The place to live for God is not a material locality, but within your own spirit, which is not of necessity within your body, for your spirit is as omnipresent as God's spirit if you did but know it. It has, however, its focus within your body, and it is there you must turn your thought. The process of turning the thought inward is called introspection, which literally means to look into or to look within. At any point along the ray of human being, a consciousness awakens, and at that point you are a self-conscious entity, the ray of consciousness. Wherever you may find yourself, if you turn your attention inward toward the central being you are, then you are introspecting. And what will introspection do for you? What is the good resulting from it? Why, just this. Your weakest endeavor in this direction calls more being into expression, so that your human being thus becomes enlarged, strengthened, and vitalized. Then, with each accession of strength, your introspection grows more penetrating, and you are able to draw more deeply on the eternal supply. It is well worth your while to take this simple lesson and study it in connection with the diagram, for you will then see what I mean by finding your radiant center. It is by getting nearer to that center that you begin to think in your heart. Your thoughts then become live things, and it is only when thus alive that they can heal disease in yourself or others. Only when thus alive can they set in motion the subconscious activities that bring prosperity and a better environment, also the peace that passes understanding. In fact, all things that shall enrich and beautify your life. Do not be impatient if a great flood of illumination does not come to you at first. Sometimes it does so come, but more frequently not. Calmness and expectancy never fail to bring the longed-for result in time, because you are working with the law, and that law is that every human being shall come into the knowledge of its radiant center, shall find God. The path is not hard, just a little quiet introspection each day, and there will dawn within you an ever-widening light that will at last unfold into the perfect day. Chapter 2. How to use your thought machine to enter into realization. It is necessary to get away from the comparatively meaningless action that constitutes the greater part of our thinking. There is nothing to realize but truth, and all thinking that does not move toward the knowledge of truth is desultory, vague, purposeless, unreal, and useless. You, the master workman, must learn how to use your thought machine. You must also learn how to let it rest. You can use it or let it rest at will, for you are not at the mercy of your thought, even if you do seem to be. You really stand behind all your thought action and have the power to control and direct it. By developing this power, you acquire the mastery over environment. Edward Carpenter speaks to the point in his visit to Anar. He says that a man should be a prey to any thought that chances to take possession of his mind is commonly assumed as unavoidable. It may be a matter of regret that he should be kept awake all night from anxiety as to the issue of a lawsuit on the morrow, but that he should have the power of determining whether he be kept awake or not seems an extravagant demand. The image of an impending calamity is no doubt odious, but its very odiousness, we say, makes it haunt the mind all the more pertinaciously, and it is useless to try to expel it. Yes, this is an absurd position for man, the heir of all the ages, to be in, hagridden by the flimsiest creatures of his own brain. If a pebble in our boot torments us, we expel it. We take off the boot and shake it out. And once the matter is fairly understood, it is just as easy to expel an obnoxious thought from your mind as it is to shake a stone out of your shoe. And until a man can do that, it is just nonsense to talk about his ascendancy over nature and all the rest of it. He is a mere slave and a prey to the bat-winged phantoms that flit through the corridors of his own brain. He continues, while at work your thought is to be absolutely concentrated in it, undistracted by anything, whatever irrelevant to the matter in hand, pounding away like a great engine with giant power and perfect economy. No wear and tear of friction or dislocation of parts, owing to the working of different forces at the same time. Then, when the work is finished, if there is no more occasion for the use of the machine, it must stop. Equally, absolutely, stop entirely. No worrying as if a parcel of boys were allowed to play their devilment with a locomotive as soon as it was in the shed. And the man must retire into that region of his consciousness where his true self dwells. I say the power of the thought machine itself is enormously increased by this faculty of letting it alone on the one hand, and of using it singly and with concentration on the other. It becomes a true tool which a master workman lays down when done with it, but which only a bungler carries about with him all the time to show that he is a possessor of it. I quote the foregoing because it bears so strongly upon my statement that it is possible to think as you decree to think, and not as you are apparently obliged to, through heredity, habit, environment, or any other cause commonly supposed to regulate and determine thought action. Assuming this to be true, and you can prove it in your own individual experience, the question then arises, if I can direct and control my thinking, what shall be the manner of that direction and control? Granted the power, to what end shall I exert it? The answer is simple. Let your thought conform to the cosmic law. Let it form a center or nucleus and build around that center. That is the way all organisms construct themselves, and your mind should build itself in the same way if it would be organic. And it must be organized or organic in order to have power. It must resolve itself into an organic unity. To do this, it must have a central purpose or idea, and move about that purpose as planets about the sun. Thought to be alive, constructive, and powerful must be thus organic. If not organized, it is vague, chaotic, and powerless. It must then have its central nucleus or idea. And what shall be the idea? Observing the cosmic law, we see every growing thing to be a unity, evolving itself into a variety, the one becoming the many. One is the basis of mathematics, and it is also the basis of all manifestation or expression. One is the basis of form, of proportion, of symmetry, of action, of all that goes to make up the objective world. Therefore, to have the mind well organized according to the cosmic law, it must have the idea of one at its center. You must see yourself and God as one, and see it strongly and permanently. It must be an abiding thought with you first, and then your thoughts must be trained to work around and about that central idea. Somewhere in your mentality there has stood something which has meant God or perfection or infinitude to you, but it has been a something that was shut away from you. God was enshrined in his own perfection, and you were not only outside of this shut-away, self-enclosed being, but it was sacrilege to identify yourself with it. This idea falls short of unity, for it is making two ones, God one and you one. And these two ones must be resolved into a single one before you can organize your mind. I have shown you how to make the atonement by seeing yourself as one with God in substance, and as flowing forth from God in external manifestation as the ray flows forth from the sun. See God then as at the center of your being, and see self not as something separate, but as continually proceeding from that center. And you are not only one with God, but one with all humanity. For every human being proceeds just as you do from this one central source, which does not divide itself, placing a part at your center and another part at your brother's center. It is whole and entire as the sun is. And as the indivisible sun gives birth to many rays, so does God's central being give birth to many beings. When you begin to see this, you begin to follow the cosmic method, starting with one as the nucleus of thought growth. Then your thought energy, instead of being scattered in numberless directions, is called in and concentrated upon an organic center. This center is alive with spirit, and from this center you begin to grow. Previous to this, your mind has been like floating protoplasm, incoherent, aimless, and well-nigh helpless. The world is full of protoplasmic people who have not yet learned the secret of an organic growth, and who are at the mercy of circumstances, or like driftwood, moving in obedience to the push of every current. But ever within each one lies the germ nucleus of the higher organism, awaiting the stir of a new development. A central conception lies back of the thought of every individual, and according to the nature of that conception is the character of the mind and thought. If the conception be true, even though not of the highest, the thought is comparatively vital. If it be positively untrue, then the thought is non-vital. This conception to which I allude is the idea the mind holds regarding itself, its nature, and its relation to that which it believes to be the cause of its existence. To understand this better, let us revert to the diagram at the head of this lesson. It contains two figures. Number 1 represents the false conception. Number 2 represents the true. In the first lesson of this series, I used the diagram of a radiant figure to stand for the entirety of being and endeavored to show that God and man must be included in it, God being the center and man the ray proceeding from the center. This is the true conception of the oneness or unity of being, including both God and man. Figure 2 in this lesson stands for this true conception, as I have just said, while Figure 1 stands for the false or mistaken conception, which represents God as a closed sphere and man as separate and apart from this sphere in some mysterious fashion. God is thus supposed to act through intervening space, externally upon man, but there is the eternal separateness and aloofness, not only between God and man, but between man and man. It is small wonder that the mind holding such a conception of itself should be painfully conscious of its limitation, and feel itself cut off from its source of supply. It would not be putting it too strongly to assert that all the weakness, inability, poverty, disease, and wretchedness in the world today is in some way referable to this false conception of the relation of man to God. It has long held the human heart in bondage. When once this is right, the whole outlook on life changes, and all things are seen in a new light. One then passes into a mental realm which is indeed a kingdom of heaven to the Hades of a former thought life. I cannot lay too much stress upon the importance of getting this basic conception right to begin with. So often students write me that they have been studying for years, seeking that highest truth which shall bring them improved mental and physical conditions, but only find themselves floundering more and more helplessly in uncertainty, doubt, and general unhappiness. This ought not so to be. This most essential subject in the world should be made so plain and direct in its rendering as to reach the needs of all. Every mind must have its central truth about which to build its organic unity. Supplied, it can work to a definite purpose and be oh so happy in its working. A diagram, says Clerk Maxwell, is a figure drawn in such a manner that the geometrical relations between the parts of the figure help us to understand relations between other objects. It is with this intent that I have used and shall go on using geometrical designs in these lessons as a help to elucidate my meaning. The blank space in the center of the radiant figure but poorly represents the wonderful reservoir of being from which all things proceed, and yet that blankness may well symbolize the unexpressed. Symbols are helps to thought and to realization, for the mind soon learns to rise from the symbol to the reality of the things symbolized, and is thus led little by little into the understanding of life and its ever-revealing mystery. In the non-understanding of life lies the pain of living. With its understanding comes increasing gladness. Professor Ray of Harvard, Dr. Caird of Glasgow University, and other thinkers of note emphasize the fact that there is but one self in the universe. And my diagram of the radiant figure will serve to explain how this can be. It seems the simplest and most evident truth in the world, although I confess there was a time in my life when I could not understand it, and that was in consequence a time of weakness, of sickness, of mental depression, of distrust in my own ability, of utter hopelessness, of the darkness of despair. Now that I see this great and central truth, the world has changed for me. The sun has risen on my life, and all is well with me. So will it be with you. Chapter 3. How you make your own destiny. It has been thought that man's destiny is decreed by some power outside of himself. This has led us to speak of the hand of destiny as the outreach of this power, controlling a man in spite of his own volition. Such a conception reduces him to an automaton, and it is small wonder that the strong spirits of the world have risen in their might to put down so arbitrary and soul-crushing a tyranny as destiny must be if outside of man and coercing him. But we have seen in our preceding lessons that man is inseparable from the entirety of being, and that in consequence of his oneness with it, there can be nothing outside of him to destiny or decree his ends. Since being includes all there can be nothing outside of it. Being controls itself from center to circumference. Straight from its center out to the point of the ray, which represents its manifestation or expression, runs the line of destiny. Man's life, starting from that center, must perforce destinate itself. But how happens it then, you ask? That man is unconscious of his destiny, that he does not know himself to be acting and creating continually, that the events of each day are a revelation to him, and that a screen is even placed between each day and its tomorrow. It happens in this way. We are screened in a measure from our past. Even the immediate yesterday cannot be wholly recalled, while the more remote past escapes us altogether. Memory stops far short of the primeval form of life from which we are supposed to spring. What we know of our earliest history is largely a matter of assumption, and who shall say that the outflowing of life or existence began with a bit of protoplasmic slime? For my part, I do not believe it. Why may not life have traveled down the spires of form as well as up them? As the worm mounts, so may the god descend. Does all motion begin at a given point and go on in one direction forever? That which begins must end. Show me the point of departure, and I will assure you of the point of arrival. One presupposes and involves the other. Life is too great to begin or end in protoplasm. We are forced to go beyond in our search for a primal source. The Godhead is the fountainhead. Living things proceed from it and to it return, for motion recurs or returns upon itself in cycles. If man comes in the latter instance from the amoeba, in the former he came from God. That is the story of the fall. It was a gradual descent and not a sudden fall from God. If I have been the amoeba in the lower spiral, I have been the angel in the higher. We have forgotten both the ascending and the descending. But as the awareness of psychological states is dawning, we become cognizant of the past. I have drawn a line from the center of the diagram to the point of the ray whence it returns to the center. This line is intended to represent the line of destiny. This line of destiny not only proceeds from the heart or center of being into the ray, which in our diagram stands for man as the expression of God, but it returns again to that center. At the turning of the line, we begin our homeward journey toward that form from which we came forth. And all along the way of return we come upon states of consciousness with which we are vaguely familiar. It is only in this sense that the term recognition can be used with reference to our evolution in consciousness. To recognize is to recognize, or cognize again, or know again. And recognition is, therefore, that act of mind whereby it knows again something previously known, but for a time absent from thought. Running at right angles with the double line of destiny which I have drawn in the diagram from center to circumference and return, you will observe cross lines. These are intended to divide the space in the ray into sections, each section representing a state of consciousness. As the God life flows out from the center, it actualizes itself in the section nearest the center, producing the highest type of existence, a divine being far above our present conception. That is the divine man spoken of in the history of all religions, man pure and perfect before the fall into matter. Then the life passes out into the next section, into the next, until it reaches the end of the ray. The number of sections in the ray is merely arbitrary. I do not intend to imply a definite number. I simply wish to show what I believe to be a fact, that you and I and all individuals have passed through states of consciousness on the outgoing line of destiny, through which we are passing again on the ingoing line. As we approach again each state that is near divinity, it is like the hearing of a beautiful but partly forgotten song, the song of the divine harmony stirring the secret recesses of the soul to the remembrance of its long-lost Eden. Were this not so, the universe would have fallen to pieces long ago, like a decayed apple. From that sound and perfect heart, you and I have come forth in the faraway past, and in our coming we destinated our present and our future. We chose it wisely and with full vision. Therefore it is all good and right and full of promise, whatever the seeming may be. Though I have forgotten that former state in which I predestined my present action, do I not know that I was then as now ensphered in divinity? That in perfect freedom I decreed to be what I am? That the tendency within me which makes me myself and not another is of itself good? I decreed with wisdom, for in that past life when my home was in God, did I not know all things? Yes, I knew all, and the freedom of the universal was mine. By that unerring law which is at once my freedom and my security, I came forth from deity, and so did you, my brother. Like two corpuscles in the lifeblood of the world, we set forth upon our way, moving with each other and yet distinct, each with a separate and inherent tendency to act, to do, and to become. We do not now remember why we started as we did, or what we wish to accomplish on the outgoing or incoming journey, but someday when the chambers of memory shall be opened, we shall recall it all. Then we shall see that never for one instant have we been long lost, not 1 inch have we gone astray, but always and ever, moving to the measure of the soul's highest law, we have trodden the path of destiny to its glorious fulfillment. The lost opportunity is not lost forever. We shall meet it again indifferently, through the gain of deeper and fuller experience. Sometime and somewhere there will come to us the occasion for taking back the cruel word and undoing the deed of wrong, and when fullest reparation will be made in joy rather than in penance. Do not mistake the meaning of the diagram. Instead of that, the figure stands for man himself, with divinity at the center and his objective life at the circumference, while the line of destiny and the sections through which it is drawn signify states or stages of awareness in the thought, life accompanied, of course, by their corresponding external conditions of the body and its surroundings. A word about this wonderful thing, awareness, and I have done. Spirit has been well defined as something which is and knows that it is. Spirit acts and reacts. When it acts, it is not of necessity conscious of its action, but when it reacts, it knows itself as acting. Awareness of psychological states is the reaction of spirit upon itself. As the ocean throws itself upon the shore and gathers its waters back in the undertow, so does the spirit know itself in the spiral of its motion. You, therefore, as a ray from the central sun of spirit, have this awareness of yourself, but you have it not in full. That is why you imagine that fate or destiny decrees your ends. You see now but a small part of yourself, and therefore do not appreciate your own greatness and power. With the fuller awareness, you will see that you yourself are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. There is a fixed result to your life and effort, but it is fixed by your own soul and the power it gets from the world, energy acting within you. You are self-destinated to infinite ends, and to that result you move not with the fettered limbs of the captive, but serenely and triumphantly to the harmonious measure of the universe. Chapter 4. Prayer, Desire, and Beyond. I do, but let me explain what I mean by prayer. I mean far more than is meant in the Orthodox interpretation, although I include that in my conception. That is to say, prayer is what Orthodoxy claims it to be, and more. Every atom prays, reaching out tiny hands to God to be filled with what it desires. From atom to man, prayer is very much the same. All action in the universe is based on prayer and its fulfillment. The seed prays to God, the source of its life, and it prays also to the earth, to the air, and to the sun. That is, it sends out a demand, and that demand is met and supplied. Emerson says, as soon as the man is at one with God, he will not beg. He will then see prayer in all action. The prayer of the farmer kneeling in his field to weed it, the prayer of the rower kneeling with the stroke of his oar are true prayers heard throughout nature, though for cheap ends. The man who is not at one with God does not see prayer in all action. He limits it to an entreaty from the human mind, to a divinity transcendent, separate, and distinct from itself. His conception so far as it goes is true enough, for divinity does transcend the human mind. Divinity is one with it, but beyond its comprehension, and the whole of life means the attaining of more and yet more of a comprehension of the divine. When the human mind is at last merged into the divine, then does it know itself to be not only the prayer, but the answer also? Those who have studied the foregoing lessons in this series will understand the above diagram to represent potential being and its expression, the center of the star standing for potential or unexpressed being, and the rays for expressed being. The human consciousness, as represented by the ray in its progress toward divinity, awakens gradually along the whole length of the ray, beginning at the small end where it focuses in external life, in circumscribed form, and widening with the ray until it reaches the breadth and absolute freedom of the center. In Ray 1, let us suppose we have the earliest awakening of the human consciousness. The presence of divinity is not realized, and yet its pressure or influence is felt as of something coming from afar. The state is analogous to that of our earth as it receives the light and warmth of the sun. It only gets this light and warmth after it has passed through many strata of earth, enveloping ethers. The earth does not know the sun as it truly is, and as it appears when passing through an intervening medium. To illustrate further, if I were a lifelong prisoner behind red glass windows, my natural inference would be that all light is red. If I get from behind these windows, I learn the truth. The entire secret of the solar spectrum may not be revealed to me, but I at least know that the light I had supposed to be red was so only by reason of the medium through which it reached me. In a like manner, the human consciousness, when it awakens at the end of the ray, feels divinity but has a misconception regarding it. This cannot be otherwise in the natural order of mental evolution. The human being at this stage of unfoldment feels divinity vaguely and reaches out toward it blindly and feebly. This reaching out is a prayer, the earliest prayer of the human mind. We are weak, imperfect, but natural and necessary, like the first number of a sequence. In a sequential order of unfoldment, number 1 is as essential to that order as the number that marks its end. Divinity shines as surely upon the fetish worshipper as upon the Christian or monotheist, but with the fetish worshipper it shines through so many media that it is not clearly revealed. In Ray 2, the prayer of the earlier consciousness has opened the way to a place 1 degree nearer the center. From Ray 2, the way is opened again into a place still nearer the center, as in Ray 3 and Ray 4. Thus, the passage is made from the earliest dawn of human consciousness to its atonement with the divine. It is a gradual awakening of life and action from the point of the ray to the radiant center. I have only designated 4 degrees in my diagram because my star has only 5 rays. In 4 of these rays, I have indicated the stages in which prayer is both necessary and efficient. In the 5th, there is no longer a need for it because the human is at last one with the divine and has all at its command. It asks nothing because it has all. It stands at the center and speaks the creative word, the word of health, the word of power. These words are made flesh, that is, they take on embodiment and become manifest in the external world. The whole story of creation is told in that one brief statement, the word made flesh, taken in its esoteric significance. The soul of every object is its thought or idea, and from that thought or idea, its outer being comes. The things we see and touch are embodied thoughts, every one of them. When we reach the creative realm, we think thoughts of health, of beauty, of happiness, and of prosperity into existence for ourselves and others. A message of pure joy goes straight from the heart of the infinite through the lips of the finite, and blesses all whom it touches. Until this place of atonement is reached, there will and must be prayer or demand. Until we come to the fountain, we must quench our thirst at the chalice in the uplifted hand of appeal. Even after we have found the fountain of all life and tasted its healing waters, we often stray from it, drawn by earth's life back into primal conditions, back into weakness, back under burdens. But we never remain there, for prayer will bring us again to the center. What it has done once it can do again and again until we are indeed and forever one with the central life. But why the drawing away? Truly, I do not know, but I suppose it to be the working of a law of rhythm, which draws us now here and now there in the fulfillment of a blessed purpose, that by many and devious paths we may attain to the fullest joy. Yes, I believe in prayer, but I also believe that we outgrow it. Prayer and desire both indicate lack, and how can there be lack in godhood or perfection? At the center we are one with God even now, while at the circumference we are human. In many of us, the God consciousness is awakened, though we do not live in it continuously, for we live also in the human. By holding the thought close to the center, we glorify the human, carrying to the extreme end of the ray the pure light of the central radiance. Enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret, himself shall reward thee openly. I do not know what significance these words carried when they were uttered, but I know what they mean to me. To go into the closet and shut the door indicates silence and seclusion, going into one's own consciousness and closing its door against the external world. There you speak to the Father which is in secret or hidden from the external eye. That Father which sees in secret, perceiving mentally and comprehending your needs, shall reward thee openly. That is, from the internal hidden source, an answer to your demand shall flow forth. That for which you ask shall come into external manifestation, and thus shall you be rewarded openly. Out of the potential or hidden world, something shall proceed which can be sensed openly, something that is made manifest or externalized in the material world. Or if it be a spiritual blessing that you ask, there shall come something so vital and real into your consciousness that there is no mistaking it. A subjective reality coming into the open of your mind from a hidden inner source. Call it God or the cosmic consciousness as you will, there is something to which the human heart instinctively appeals, something which answers the appeal, and finally something with which the human heart is at last united when it no longer has need of prayer. Chapter 5. How to Outgrow Pain. You have now before you a diagram by which I hope to prove that you can outgrow or get away from pain. It is well known that pain has been and still is a factor in evolution. I do not deny that pain and fear have preserved the organic being from destruction over and over again, but after all, it has been the getting away from pain, rather than the pain itself, that has induced the evolution. It is the getting away from pain that has constituted the activity of the self-preservative instinct. If a man's body could be cut to pieces without suffering, he would often incur mutilation without any knowledge of what was happening, whereas pain forces him to struggle against the mutilation. If fire could burn his body without suffering, he might be reduced to ashes without protest. As you see, it is not so much pain that has been the beneficent factor in his advancement and growth as the getting away from pain. As man grows in intelligence, he is going to devise new methods to escape pain, and in doing so, he is to further his advance. The time is coming when man cannot suffer. Nature points to such a time even now. She will not permit her creatures to suffer beyond a certain limit. When that limit is reached, she mercifully lulls them into unconsciousness, or, as in the hour of death, wakes them to bliss. William Flagg, in his work on yoga, writes of St. John of the Cross, of whom it was said that through the silence of the night, the sound of his lash would reach the ears of the friars, who trembled when they heard it, for they knew how merciless he was to himself. There came a time, however, when he could devise no penance that did not yield pleasure instead of pain. Flagg accounts for this by supposing that the practice of penance, thoroughly and long persisted in, has power, along with other bodily modifications it effects, such as adamantine hardness, control of breath, levitation, Herculean strength, etc., to actually reverse the normal action of the sensory nerves and to convert pain into pleasure, or else so completely overcome pain by pleasure that no pain is felt. The latter, by the way, would hardly be more strange than that a condemned witch could tranquilly slumber on a pile of burning branches, a thing that has often happened. I believe that Flagg's supposition is correct, and that a turning point can be reached by both the individual and the race where the action of the sensory nerves is reversed, yielding thereafter no more pain, but only pleasure. A subtle forecast of this must impress the minds of those who believe in mental healing, for unless there is an ultimate escape from pain, to what end is their endeavor? The door of escape need not open through penance, for life gives us in certain stages pain enough, unsought. If we can but believe we are on the pathway to bliss, how bright and hopeful the outlook! But since pain has served such a purpose in evolution, how can we abolish it without retarding our progress? If to get away from pain is a factor in our development, do we not still need pain, if only that we may evade it? No, because the perfection of our individuality is at hand, and the perfected individual will have the spiritual quality of impregnability and will be indivisible and indestructible. In that event, we shall not need pain as a danger signal. We shall need no warning to escape from destructive forces, for they shall have no power to hurt us. And now let me refer to the diagram to still further explain my meaning. I have shown in my previous lessons that man in his outer life bears the same relation to a vast and unexplored central life that a ray of the star bears to its center. Man in his real essence is the center, but in his outer manifestation or expression, he is an emanation or ray of this central being. The pure white light of the center, in passing into manifestation, becomes a duality. It is converted into both light and darkness. The pure bliss of the center, in passing into manifestation, also becomes a duality. It is converted into both bliss and pain. The pure good of the center, in passing into manifestation, also becomes a duality. It is converted into both good and evil. The pure perfection of the center, in passing into manifestation, also becomes a duality. It is converted into both perfection and imperfection. The pure real of the center, in passing into manifestation, also becomes a duality. It is converted into both real and apparent. Expression or manifestation is therefore a mixture of light and darkness, of bliss and pain, of good and evil, of perfect and imperfect, of real and apparent. That is, expression as we have it now is thus dual. A blight but we can imagine an expression that is all light, all bliss, all good, all perfection, and all real. This is the ideal, the dream of the world, and toward it the world is pressing. Oh, this glorious center within and back of expression in us all. Who would not call it more and more out into the world of the actual, a world without darkness, pain, evil, imperfection, or unreality? A world without these is beyond our conception now, but so is our present state of being, unknown and unimagined by the earlier forms of life in which we functioned in past ages. The moneron, or one-celled organism, saw not its destiny but moved unerringly toward the man, drawn by an ideal close at hand, but all unconscious of the larger vision. Man moves today toward the ideal that is closest to him, not seeing yet the larger and fuller ideal, but nonetheless surely moving toward it, toward the highest life, the highest strength, and the highest joy. Heaven is within, said the Christ of past ages. Heaven is within, echoes the man of today. Yes, within, my brother, at the radiant center of all life. You are never separated from it for one instant. No one can take heaven from you but yourself, and that by the closing of your spiritual eye. Right in the midst of poverty, sickness, and distress, you can find the heaven within. And when you find it, all that environs you will change to accord with the inner heaven. Even though you do not yet understand much of the laws of life, you can accomplish much in a very simple fashion. When you feel depression settling down upon you like a cloud of gloom, instead of sinking under the pressure, stand up against it and affirm, I will be happy. I will rejoice. You may say it weakly at first, but say it again with persistence, and strength will pour into it, for the Spirit will quicken your affirmation with joyous life. Soon every atom of your body and mind will move in obedience to your affirmation, and you will find yourself happy even though as yet there has been no change in your surroundings, but that change for the better will also come. Until it does, keep up your rejoicing, no matter what happens, wherever you are and whatever you are doing. Remember, you are on the pathway to heaven, which means that your eyes are opening so that heaven can be revealed to you. When it is so revealed, a radiance will go forth from your spirit which will illumine your own life and the lives of those around you. And is it not enough to make you glad to know that the movement of the whole world is toward greater life and greater joy? Evolution means a passage from darkness to light, from pain to bliss, from evil to good, from imperfection to perfection, and from apparent to real. Otherwise, this would be a sad and cruel world indeed. If, as you read this lesson, you are filled with a sudden uplift of the Spirit, know that it is because my words are true, and being true, they are living words straight from the heart of being. Living words are charged with health, with life, and with joy, and you, in reading them, are moved to rejoice with me, for we light our lamps not only at the central fire, but also one of another. Chapter 6, the cause and cure of old age consciousness is really awareness, or seeing mentally. A dead eye cannot see, it is consciousness looking through the eye that sees, and in death, consciousness departs from the body, leaving the eye without sight. My theory for the failing of sight is that in old age, consciousness recedes from the circumference. Less interest is felt in outer things, and the mind is given over largely to retrospection, to living over past experiences. As every organ that is not in use becomes atrophied, the eye that is not used grows weak and incapable of sight. I will not say that this is the sole reason for defective seeing, but it is largely in evidence, and the remedy lies in forcing the consciousness outward and taking it entirely away from retrospection, from living in past scenes and past experiences. To live in the present is the characteristic of youth. To live in the past is the characteristic of old age. If you would retain youth of body and perfect sight, live in the present. Your past is dead. To contemplate it is deadening. Contemplate the living present, and you will be more alive. Consciousness sees anything that is incorporeal without the aid of the eye. But when it would extend its sight into the corporeal world, it must build itself a physical bridge fitted with nerves of sensation, by means of which consciousness can come in touch with the external. Seeing is not in the bridge itself, but in the seeing faculty that looks across the bridge. This seeing faculty is consciousness itself, the eye that never sleeps, or the eye of the spirit. You, being spirit, have the all-seeing eye. At the center of your consciousness, there is, to be sure, an outer form of consciousness which is not the real awareness and which does not see at all times. It is, in a measure, blind. That is, its sight is darkened. This outer consciousness is the pathway or channel through which the inner or real consciousness, or all-seeing eye, sees the physical world, and when this outer consciousness is darkened, it naturally follows that the physical sight fails. It is this outer consciousness that broods over the past, and it is this brooding that largely causes its seasons of blindness. Moreover, the outer consciousness, taking note as it does of the external world and seeing failure and decay written on all things, and accepting that to be the ultimate of life, stamps that ultimate upon the physical eye, and it degenerates accordingly. The reason it affects the physical eye, thus, is because as a man thinks, so is he. What he thinks about himself is stamped upon his physical body and affects its atoms. But the deductions of the outer consciousness are fallible, for the reason that they are based on illusions of the senses. In fact, the outer consciousness is built up of sense perceptions and is like a child crying in the night, a child crying for the light until the sun of the inner consciousness shines upon the darkness and reveals the truth. Now, the truth is that sight never fails in reality. The all-seeing eye that never sleeps is eternal, therefore decay and death cannot touch it with weakness and dissolution. The inner consciousness, knowing this truth about itself, gradually impinges its knowledge upon the outer consciousness, for the latter is always under the influence of the former, being on its way to an atonement with it. By means of this approaching atonement, the way is opening for the inner consciousness to so influence the outer that its sight also shall become indestructible, vivid, and enduring. To apply this practically, refer to the diagram at the head of this lesson. The star of manifestation, in the center of which I have pictured consciousness as the all-seeing eye, or the perceiving principle, which is at the center of being. See yourself as proceeding from the center in the form of a ray, and then trace your being back from the point of the ray to the center. Realize in this way that you are one with the center, and that because it has the power of sight, so have you. Then let your thought pass outward to the end of the ray, and think that you are carrying the power of clear seeing with you outward to the very end of the ray, or the extreme of outer vision. In this way, you will renew your sight and regain perfect seeing, or if you are under treatment, you will thus cooperate and expedite your healing. You can heal yourself in this manner if you can hold your thoughts steadily to the issue. If you lack this ability, then it is better to get a healer to help you and simply cooperate with the healer. If your healer requests you to affirm many times daily, "I can see," you may do it half-heartedly, feeling it to be an absurdity when evidently you cannot see. But it is of the inner consciousness that you speak when you say, "I can see," and therefore the affirmation is absolutely true because the sight of that inner consciousness is perfect, it being the eye of the spirit that never sleeps and never knows weariness. When the outer consciousness is not active and you see with the inner sight alone, it is omniscient. That is, it can see what is taking place in any part of the world, showing that the bridge of sensation is not actually essential to vision, although it has its part to play in the normal life in which the outer consciousness is active. Evidently, it is the purpose of the law of life that inner and outer consciousness shall be fused as one consciousness, and that the nerves of sensation shall not be excluded. In other words, the senses are not to be despised or eradicated from the organism, but transmuted to a higher service, and for the present, at least, they are necessary to normal seeing. Now let me recapitulate. Consciousness is seeing or awareness, and man, being a conscious being, has therefore the power of seeing. This power is not subject to diminution or lack, but is eternal and indestructible. But sight is obscured because of a sort of veil between the outer consciousness and the inner. The order of evolution is that this veil shall be swept away, in which event both outer and inner consciousness become as one, and the real or inner consciousness then permeates man from center to circumference. The sweeping aside of this veil, which takes place gradually, is the process of atonement by which man's external life comes into direct touch with the inner spiritual life, and this is equivalent to being born anew, or regenerated, revitalized in every part. It is operative now only on the unconscious plane, but it remains for man to discover the law and use it consciously, for beyond a certain point he is bound to advance only by conscious effort, as nature will not do for him that which he can do himself. For that would prevent the exercise of his higher powers and stultify his individuality. The power to see dwells in perfection at the center of life, and with that center you are one. Picture mentally that power at the center and then trace it out through the ray of your being. This will carry the power outward with your thought, and in time you will see with perfect vision. Chapter 7, where the ego knows itself. As man passes from his God center to his human circumference of tangible and visible expression, he is subject to certain laws that distort that expression. To use an old simile, he is like a straight stick that appears crooked when plunged in running water. He is living a dual experience, that of a true and that of an untrue life. Between these two lives, he moves as a traveler who is at home in neither. The untrue life is a necessity and a part of expression, as essential to it as vapors are to the earth, and just as elusive. While consciousness may be only awake to the untrue life, we are at the same time living the true life, each and every one of us. That we do not know, it makes no difference. It goes on just the same, adjusting our mistakes, inspiring us with new and higher ideals, guiding and guarding us in all endeavor, for the true life is one with God and filled with divinity. The awareness of life, which we call consciousness, the human consciousness, which is a different thing from the cosmic or divine consciousness, first manifests itself within the boundaries of the untrue life. It sees things not as they really are, but as they appear to be. You cannot convince a child that the horizon is not the limit of the world, and it is the limit of his world at the time. But his world spreads and enlarges with his increasing intelligence. When the child's field of vision becomes the subjective realm, he is encompassed by another restrictive but ever-widening horizon, which at last becomes coextensive with being itself and is one with the cosmic consciousness. In our diagram, the star of manifestation, I have drawn an inner star to represent the true life. Between it and the outer limit lies the field of the untrue life, the ephemeral, the changeful. While the consciousness remains in the outer field, it is subject to the illusions which it accepts as real. Here disease riots, doubt and fear prevail, fleeting pleasure is followed swiftly by pain and loss, and spurious love suffers its heartaches and jealous pangs. This is the country in which the prodigal son found himself when, far away from the Father's house, he fed upon husks. When the human consciousness passes from this outer sphere into the inner state of being, it is making the return to the Father's house where plenty abounds and where hunger is unknown. But it will not seek the Father's house until hunger grows intense and it finds that husks contain no nourishment. Not until all things fail in the far country does it return to its home. Wherever the spark of awareness is a light, there the ego knows itself. When it is a light in the outer field, in the space between the inner star and the outer, then the ego is only conscious of a weak and lowly conditioned self, separate from its source of existence. But when it is a light in the inner field, then it knows its true life and its great powers. When consciousness enters the inner field and takes up its position there, it does not lose its hold on the outer field, but reaches forth and commands it as an outlying territory, in which it does not care to dwell, but into which it may make excursions at will as its lord and governor. It has thus lost nothing and has gained much. It has found a better country in which there are facilities for carrying new life into the old. Now when it goes forth, it is not as the prodigal, but as the prince. It finds the husk, but the kernel is within. As I have said before, the true life has been operative all the while, but there has been no consciousness of that life. Here, let me make a distinction between consciousness and life. I will only say in brief that consciousness is the knowledge of life. While there can be no consciousness without life, there can be life without consciousness, or in other words, there may be life without a knowledge of itself. You can probably remember the time when, as a child, you had no knowledge of yourself but simply lived. I can distinctly remember the hour when a knowledge of self came to me. It dawned somewhat cruelly, for an angry playmate criticized my personal appearance adversely. I then began to have a consciousness of self, and a very unpleasant consciousness it was. A poor little Eve had tasted the fruit growing on the tree of knowledge and was straightway driven from Eden. The good was to come later when my consciousness of self passed through the physical to the inner life and being. I have used this personal illustration to show how the passage from outer to inner consciousness takes place. It has its awakening in the outer or objective mind, then penetrates to the inner or subjective mind, and finally to the inmost or spiritual self, which always moves and acts in the true life but is not conscious of itself as so doing. We are driven by lash and spur out of ignorance into wisdom, out of error into truth, out of illusion into reality. Suffering and unrest are the goads that drive us on. These goads cannot touch the real self, but they affect the outer self and move it to action. The real self that sits back of the apparent self is the riddle of the Sphinx, the problem of the ages. If you would solve this riddle, watch yourself. See how the real you is back of all action, not in it, but influencing it. Then see how the apparent you, the you which you know most intimately, looks to the real you for approval, for guidance, and for continued existence. For this apparent you has no independent life of its own. It is as dependent upon the real self as the shadow upon the object that casts it. Remove the object and the shadow disappears, but the real self is something that cannot be removed. It is permanent. Therefore, its shadow lingers until the sun is at meridian. Then the shadow is lost in substance. And what is the real self? It is of the substance of deity, it is divinity. Let us not be afraid to affirm it, for it is the truth. How does the real self influence the apparent self? Suppose I play for you, Beethoven's Sonata Appassionata. I set up motion in mind and body, but I myself am not in that motion. I cause it, I oversee it, I control it, and for those very reasons I am not in it. The apparent I is in it, but not the real I. Note the expressions, my mind, my body, myself. What do they mean? Simply that I have a mind, I have a body, I have a self. I, the master, cause this mind, this body, and this self to function or act in rendering the sonata. My apparent self, or the self that appears, must hold close to the real self, the self that is hidden. The real self is back of mind, back of functioning, and expresses itself through both. The great real self holds the entire sonata in the hollow of its hand. It encompasses it round about, it sees it in its fullness. This, the functional or apparent self cannot do, for it has not the comprehensive vision, the omniscience that sees the end as well as the beginning, but by virtue of its functional character must pass through all the intermediate terms, cognizing each in its passage, but never grasping the whole. Every artist, musician, speaker, or writer who thrills us does so because his functional self is in touch with the true self and obedient to it. All else is mechanical, automatic, dead, and uninspiring. Nothing can thrill but life, and life is the affluence of the true self. How can anyone feel alone, helpless, or uncared for with such a self at hand, full of infinite resource? If you cannot believe that you have such a self, seek for it, and you will find it. Set up a shrine to it in your consciousness, and the divine fire will descend upon the altar. When you have seen the divine radiance, you need not withdraw from the illusions in the outer court. Seek them if you will, but take them at their actual value. So will your sorrows be lighter, your joys higher, and your loves stronger and truer. You lose nothing by going into the true life. Nay, instead, you gain all. Chapter 8. Being and Becoming. In the preceding lessons, I have endeavored to show that man is one with an all-comprehensive being which flows from center to circumference, and from circumference back to center by its own intrinsic law or mode of motion. This law is not imposed upon it from the outside, for there is no outside, since being is all there is. Being, or any part of being, moves as it does because it is what it is, and for no other reason. The reason is in itself and nowhere else. But if the branch could be supposed to have a small mind peculiar to itself in the tree, a larger mind peculiar to itself, this would illustrate very well the difference between the state of consciousness which becomes functional, or acts in the personal mind, and that entire, whole, perfect, and complete consciousness which projects the personal, that unity which projects from itself plurality, the one making itself the many. I use the star as a diagram because it shows, in a way, so far as any symbol can express verity, how it is that one becomes many. It does it by radiation from its own center. Now, you know Plato says, if one is, the one cannot be many. That is quite true. Our one does not break itself up into the many or become less itself. It simply puts forth from itself beings, which have the appearance of separateness but yet are one with the central unity, just as the rays of the sun, though apparently separate from the sun, are one with it and radiate from it. And now, notice the difference between being and becoming. Plato does not say the one cannot become many, he says the one cannot be many. Being and becoming are not synonymous terms. For being stands for the thing in itself, while becoming stands for the acting or doing of that thing in itself. For instance, I am. That is a primary fact. I do. That is a secondary fact. Were it not for the I am, there would be no I do. The I am is the subject in the sentence of life. The I do is its predicate. The I am is the center of being. The I do is its circumference. The I am is divinity. The I do is humanity. Very few understand this all right, and therefore, when they read such a statement as the oneness of man and God, they exclaim, "Oh, what dreadful sacrilege!" To their minds, divinity is hereby dragged from its highest state down into the mire. But divinity cannot be dragged anywhere. It goes voluntarily, graciously, willingly into the mire. Every time a lily or a rose is born, you can see divinity in the rose, you can see it in the lily, but you do not realize that to get into each, it must go down into the soil. The soil, mind you, as its name indicates, has much in it that is far from pure and sweet. The soil is composed of the dregs of physical substance. It is full of putrefaction and all uncleanliness. The fuller it is of these base elements, the better it is for the fair flower springing from it. Notice how naturally we call putrefaction or impurity a base element, and also notice that it is the base of growth. It may be a fanciful conception, but I can see that the flower grows away from such a base because of its own inherent purity, carrying with it just enough of the lower or base element to enable it to express itself on the material plane. For only thus can it relate itself to that plane. Without the base element, it would so transcend the physical as not to be visible or tangible to the senses, and to us it would be non-existent. In other words, a flower dwells in divinity as a thought of God, and like any other thought, it clothes itself with material substance and becomes a visible thought. We see and touch it, and for the first time become conscious of the existence of that which has lived in hidden spheres as a reality. But it is now visiting us on this plane as a material thing. It is the real inner life of the flower that appeals to our sense of the beautiful in its form, color, and perfume which constitute its language. It is telling us of its triumph over the powers of darkness, its passage from the unclean to the holy, and its apotheosis in bloom. I remember once seeing two exquisite flowers that told me their story in language never to be forgotten. They spoke to me in a foreign tongue, the language of angels perchance, but I found its translation in my inner life, and it has remained with me and will remain with me always. The flowers were two blossoms of the night, blooming Sirius, which, as you doubtless know, blooms for a very brief period only. An hour or two, I believe. As I stood before their wonderful translucent whiteness that radiated delicate, tremulous waves of light, they seemed to me like celestial beings, and I understood why our atmosphere must be too heavy for them, and why their stay with us must be so brief. It was a beautiful custom of the town in which I lived for the owner of a night, blooming Sirius, to invite in all the friends and neighbors upon the occasion of its blooming, and I remember well the stillness that was in the room as we moved in line, each stopping a moment in contemplation before those silent flowers, silent to the outer ear but full of speech to the inner. A hush fell upon the assembly. The room was a shrine, and within it was the holy presence. An indescribable longing swept over me to fall on my knees before those messengers from a celestial sphere and implore a fuller revelation, for there seemed so close at hand a glory to be revealed. The convention held me, and I passed on, silent and wistful, while the calm, sweet flowers seemed to be saying, "Peace. Have faith. We have been hidden and are now revealed, and so shall it be with all things now hidden. All that you desire shall come to you in good time. Only be patient and faithful always. There dwells with me the divine message of those celestial flowers. Let it be a message to you also. The apotheosis of the flower is like that of the God-man. It has been said that the greatest sinners make the greatest saints, and if this is true, it must be on account of the principle here involved, just as the larger and more vigorous plant must extend its roots wider and deeper into the soil to balance the greater breadth and height above, while the smaller and less vigorous can do with a slighter root. Hold on the soil. There is no premium on the impure life in consequence of this principle. It is, in fact, a going away from the central sun and involves an imprisonment in darkness. But only the going away makes possible the return with its unfolding experiences and its joys. Hence the descent of the spirit into matter with its so-called evil and attendant penalty is good because of what it leads to. The things we call evil are the imperfect, unfinished, undeveloped forms of good. There is no base desire that may not be transmuted into its correlative aspiration. A base desire is an incomplete aspiration. It is force going downward before it goes upward. An isolated fact may be evil, but taken with the whole, it is an unquestionable good. Murder is an evil, but to the slayer and the slain there must come through the divine alchemy, the ultimate good. Each will wade through pools of suffering, but the bloodstains will be washed away. A fiery newborn planet seething upon its orbit is an evil thing compared with that same planet when it has reached its productive period. But from the first, it holds all good and beautiful things in its bosom. They are there, but concealed. Man is the same in his process of unfoldment, passing from the primal, chaotic, burning, or passionate period of his existence to his perfection of being. All states of becoming are more or less evil, and we pass out of each owing to a degree of pain or discomfort that we experience and from which we would escape. This engenders restlessness, want, desire, and action, which all amount to the same thing. All are forms of discontent, signifying emptiness, a vacuum, a lack of contents, a state in which the mind does not contain or hold within itself something which it desires. It is hungry and seeks fullness, reaching out into its environs for impression and experience. This is the secret of action, the secret of evolution, the secret of becoming. There are two methods of teaching in the New Thought, each repudiating the other as false. One busies itself with expounding the act of the I-do side of life and ignores the changeless I am, while the other recognizes only the I am and ignores the I-do. These contending factions remind me of the old fable concerning two knights who approached a trophy shield from opposite directions. One side of the shield was gold and the other silver. Thus, each knight, seeing but one side, was led to dispute with the other about the metal composing it, until from words they came to blows. Luckily, just at this juncture, a third knight appeared upon the scene to whom the dispute was referred. This knight had wisdom enough to look on both sides of the shield and then inform the disputants that the shield was gold upon one side and silver upon the other. The I am and the I do factions are each right so far as each goes, but neither is telling more than half the story, leaving the other half untold. The I am faction claims to be perfect now, to have all things now, and to it there is no past or future, for all is in the eternal now. This is wholly unintelligible to the I-do faction, which traces its origin back to protoplasm and finds its whole life proceeding from that beginning. It deals with the unfolding or evolution of form, but says never a word of the infolding or involution of that which produces form. It sees life as action and action only. The Radiant Center teaching covers the entire ground held by both factions, recognizing evolution as a fact and acknowledging the existence of something in man that does grow or evolve. It also recognizes something in man which does not grow, which is always the same, permanent and unchanging, something which always is and never becomes, something which produces action but is not involved in it. If we see only action in life and lose sight of the calm center of being, we are drawn into a maelstrom and are whirled ceaselessly about in a round of mental activity without repose or mastery. But when we see in thought the calm, unchanging center, the mental activity converges toward that center, becomes stilled, and then goes forth from that center with a new, direct, and purposeful impulse. It goes forth from the master and is therefore masterful. There is an energy of position in this sort of activity, coming as it does from the energy of position, acquires a power unknown to the motion of the maelstrom. It goes out straight from the center instead of being whirled helplessly about. So long as there is expression, there must be an I do and an I am behind the I do. I, as the I am, strong in the consciousness of my oneness with the center of being, can establish an activity greater than is possible to me when I see myself only from the I do viewpoint. I thus establish a spiritual activity from the I am that is not a sickly, pale-faced asceticism falsely called spirituality, but a healthy, full-blooded, muscular, intense, warm, living, vital spirituality which is the true thing and not its counterfeit. A glorified humanity with God in it instead of out of it comes from the all-roundness of vision that sees the I am and its relation to the I do, and then lives the life thus typified, a life strong at the center and free at the circumference. This is the life of the perfect human, a life possible to you and to me. Chapter 9. All power is yours. Why are you poor in the midst of plenty? There must be some reason for it, for nothing exists without a reason for existence. There is a law of cause and effect, and every effect comes from its cause. You may think you are poor because of the existing order of things, but in my opinion, the existing order gets blamed for more than it deserves. If it were wholly to blame, all men would be poor, whereas people of force attain success in spite of the existing order of things. In a sense, it is responsible because you, I, and others make up the order of things. Because we are what we are, it is what it is. Because we are mentally weak, feeble, and confused, we twist up the order and get it all awry. When we straighten out ourselves, we shall straighten out the existing order, for we produce that order from day to day. Just so long as we mentally place power outside of us instead of within, we shall continue in the weak state and get no hold on the eternal energy which lies within us and awaits our call to spring to action. I believe with Emerson, he who knows that power is inborn, that he is weak because he has looked for good out of him and elsewhere, and so perceiving throws himself unhesitatingly on his thought, instantly rights himself, stands in a correct position, commands his muscles, works miracles. Just as a man who stands on his feet is stronger than a man who stands on his head. If you have learned the truth inculcated in these lessons, if you can see yourself as a ray proceeding from the central energy, if you can realize that in that central energy, all things that you would do and all that you would be exist potentially, and that you can call them forth from within, you are then standing squarely on your feet with head erect, chest well up, lungs inflated, and power in your right hand. The existing order of things, be it what it may, then has no power over you, for by your mental attitude you have cleared a space for your energies and made a place for yourself in the world's activities. Picture yourself as standing thus, and so great is the effect of mental imagery that before long your mental image will become an external reality. You can do this alone and unaided if you have only a crust to eat and one room to live in with the rent unpaid. Ill luck and apparently insurmountable obstacles are the appliances in life's gymnasium on which you can increase your mental muscle. Would you fall down weakly before such an aid and eye it with terror? You are foolish if you do. You have seen a horse tremble with fear at the sight of a newspaper caught up and swirled by the wind, and have no doubt smiled at its foolish fright, but all the while you are subject to terrors quite as unsubstantial. Now look at the star that heads this lesson, for it illustrates the truth I am trying to place firmly in your consciousness, the truth of your independence. You are independent because the source on which you depend lies within, and it is not a little spark of life, but the whole thing. You will never understand that unless you picture it to yourself in the form of a radiant figure like the star I use in these lessons. It has helped me, and I know it will help you. I used to be just as fearful and weak as anyone could possibly be. At the age of 31, I thought life was all over for me. Every ideal and every hope had failed me. Sorrow, misfortune, and ill health crowded hard upon me until I fell into the depths of nervous prostration. Just as life seemed at its last and lowest ebb, help came to me in the form of a knowledge of my true self, and from that time, I began to grow in health, in hope, and in prosperity. Knowing what I do, is it strange that I should try to help my suffering friends and brothers? If I do not make the truth plain enough, tell me, and I will make it plainer. The difficulty is that some of these inner conceptions that we feel so strongly ourselves are not easy to convey in so many words to others. That is why mental treatments are often more effectual than volumes of written instruction. Thoughts are apprehended by the subconscious that cannot be conveyed by word to the conscious mind. A thought without being expressed in words can pass from mind to mind and translate itself to a patient in renewed hope, in an increase of strength, in plans for the improvement of conditions, and in general health and well-being. I am often asked if the radiant center of being is a reality. It is. It is the only reality. It is living substance. It is power. If you come in contact with any external object, you feel its presence. Just so do you feel this inner substance of which all external objects are the expression. It is not found by thinking or reasoning about it, but by feeling for it as a blind man would grope for an object. Just as I was about to begin upon this lesson, I came upon the following passage, which I now introduce as singularly appropriate. The statues that adorn the bridge of St. Angelo in Rome are reflected in the water below. As you come upon the banks of the Tiber, there on the placid stream are the clear outlines of the old heroic forms, and then as you look up, you see the statues standing on their pedestals of stone on the bridge above. So hope is the reflection in the soul of blessings that are above and beyond. In a like manner, the soul senses the presence of its radiant center. It sees the reflection of its reality in the stream of consciousness. From the reflection, it is led to look up, to seek that which is so reflected, just as one looks up from the banks of the Tiber to the heroic forms on the bridge of St. Angelo. And how do you know when you are actually in touch with your radiant center? When your consciousness becomes aware of the radiant center, there comes to you an inner light and a sense of expansion, as though you were growing wings. A delightful vision of approaching freedom, a tendency to draw deep, full electrical breaths, and in short, all the sensations of a newborn creature, for indeed you are thus newly born. Old things have passed away, and all things have become new. You stand in a new world of thought and feeling. Youth returns to you, with all its charm and mystery of opening life. For in the words of Meister Eckhart, the nearer a thing is to its spring, the younger it is, the farther from its spring, the older it is. The nearer the soul is to God, the younger she is. And being again young, you start to grow like a beautiful flower from your radiant center. Others may seek by much reasoning to understand the mystery of life. It is enough for me to live it. I ask no greater joy, and to live it, one must begin according to the law of life and unfold from a center, just as all living things do, from the smallest to the greatest organism. This law regulates growth in life. All else is a dead mosaic. You are not a mosaic, but a living organism. Growth may be arrested in you, and you may need a new influx of life. Will it come to you? Yes, for the seeking. Mental treatment does not convey life to you to outside. It arouses your own life from within. Your life is your own, and no mental healer can confer it upon you, for it is yours already. That life lies sleeping, as life sleeps in a seed before it is awakened and begins to grow. The seed of a new life lies within you, and when it is aroused to action, you will have a feeling of power within yourself. And this feeling is power, for to feel power is to have power. Power is within, and all power is yours. Chapter 10. The author's experience in the realization of desires. If I were asked by what standard I judge any system of teaching, I would reply that its merit is to be estimated by the amount of joy it brings to the world. I think there is no better or truer test. All religions, no matter though their central idea be self-denial, self-sacrifice, or penance, hold out the hope of future joy. Without this, they would instantly and forever lose all power over the hearts of men. The fact is, men make their own religions, and they make them in accordance with the brain material they have evolved. Back of the minds of men stands the great reality, but it stands unexpressed to the human consciousness only so far as that consciousness is able to receive, apprehend, or interpret. As it receives, apprehends, and interprets more and more clearly, the great reality is seen to be the source of happiness, and it is also seen to lay no penance, no suffering, no sickness, no poverty, no wretchedness upon any man. It does not even inflict present punishment as a means to future blessedness. Whence come then the suffering, the sickness, the poverty, and the wretchedness? They are incidents or attendants of growth, and mark the soul's passage toward the light. I will venture to assert, on the strength of a law running through all nature, that every growing thing feels pain, lack, and oppression in the earlier stages of its growth. The little seed speaks not of the weight of earth upon its bosom or of the darkness in which its life is enshrouded, but I know it feels them very much as we might, only in a lesser degree. It feels them as unhappy experiences in its growth, but they are all forgotten when it gains its freedom in the air and light above. Air and light stand for the seed's apotheosis, its heaven. This heaven is attained very much as we attain our heaven. by growth and endeavor, by aspiration and unfolding. Surely the apotheosis of a plant cannot mean more than that of a human soul. And by virtue of the law of compensation, a happiness awaits us all that is commensurate with our pain. It is written on all things as well as in our hearts as a truth of life. The hope of heaven is as universal as life itself. Wherever there is a human mind, there is an idea of heaven, and the idea is a reflection of reality. Our mistake has been in placing that heaven too far away, but this merely shows the childish belief of the race, with its tendency to live in the outer world and its inability to look within. I can well remember the time when I was utterly dependent on the happenings of a day for my enjoyment. My first thought on awakening in the morning was, I hope something pleasant will happen to me today. I looked continually to some external stimulus for my happiness, and need I say that I was as continually disappointed? Every draught of happiness had its bitter dregs, which I seemed forced to drink, and every flower of enjoyment its canker at the heart, so that it withered and drooped in my hand. Life seemed hard and cruel, while over all a grim deity held sway, a deity whose purpose seemed to beat and crush me into subjection. I had not then discovered that souls are only crushed upward. It all seemed very wretched, yet I saw no way out, and there was nothing for me to do but to suffer on. To say that I rebelled was to put it very lightly. The advice given to Job, to curse God and die, appealed to me as good to follow if I could only know the outcome. There was apparently no way of escape from that terrible will which cast a blight on all innocent enjoyment. I thought with ever-increasing discomfort of that passage in Psalms. Whither shall I go then from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be made light about me. How I feared and hated that dreadful omnipresence. To me, it was a relentless, all-seeing, all-powerful tyrant with whom it was impossible to cope and from whom there was no escape. The utter hopelessness of my state and of a whole world at the mercy of such a ruler finally plunged me into the depths of nervous prostration. But on that, I will not dwell. It was all right and good, though grievous at the time. By the unerring law of the cosmos, I was to move, as do all growing things, from darkness into light. If your mental state is dark, dear friend, it leads to light. The experience of the seed is yours. You and the seed are one in the universal process of growth, and what is true of it is true also of you. From darkness to light, from pain to joy, is the line of growth. If the seed could think, and we have yet to prove that it cannot, it might feel toward the darkness and opposing forces which encompass and circumscribe its little life. Something as I once felt toward the power that thwarted me at every turn and brought me the keenest suffering. I did not know that it was God's method for bringing out my inner resources. The seed reacts unconsciously against pressure and will not be held down. In other words, it is crushed upward. Man is just beginning to learn the meaning of the crushing process, and the God power within him is now beginning to assert itself, and it rises to heights proportionate to the weight laid upon it. In his beautiful book, 5 Windows of the Soul, Professor Atkinson says something of the sea anemone that illustrates the widening vision of the soul. He says, when you take the sea anemone out of the sea to bring it home, its tentacles are all drawn in, and it is a shapeless, slimy lump. But put it in a glass and pour in water fresh from the sea, and it will presently open out like a flower and gently wave its 100 arms. It has no knowledge of your presence, nor of its fellow anemone near it, nor of the seaweeds and other pretty things in the aquarium with it, nor of the sweet tones of the piano playing in the room, nor of the merry laugh of your children. To it, all these things are not. The soft feel of the water, its gentle motion, perhaps its temperature, too hot or too cold, these are the universe to your anemone. But drop a small empty shell into the water so that in sinking it will touch the point of one tentacle, and instantly that tentacle closes on it. The anemone's world has widened. It perceives the existence of something which is not itself and not the water, and you soon find that it perceives also some of the properties of that thing. For after clutching it for a second or two, it relaxes its hold and drops it. Should a luckless shrimp come in contact with one of the tentacles, it will be seized in the same way, but as it struggles to free itself, other tentacles will close in and hold it fast. And altogether your anemone will display an energy which it did not display when it was dealing with the shell or the meat. It perceives not matter only this time, but motion. Assuming, then, that the anemone has consciousness, we find that it has perceived the existence of matter not itself, and of some of the properties of matter, resistance, hardness or softness, and weight, also of motion. So far, it has penetrated into the mystery of things. Now it occurs to me that our position in this world is very like that of the anemone. Our life is a continual attempt to penetrate the mystery of things. The anemone, in its small way, as it reaches out with its tentacles and touches the things of its narrow world, is realizing just as truly as are we when we reach inward after that which is unseen but nonetheless real. Many things are invisible to the anemone, other things are invisible to us. As the anemone is unconscious of the music of the piano and the voices of the children, so are we in the presence of wondrous and beautiful things which we know not. If our senses were fine enough, we might see and know much that is now virtually non-existent to us. For like the anemone that grasps the meat and the shrimp while unconscious of the music and the voices, so do we fail to come in touch with or realize much of the world about us. As the world of the anemone widens, so does ours. In both, it is a growth in realization. It is touching more of the outer and inner world. The anemone does not think as we think, and yet it distinguishes between the objects in its world of consciousness. It knows that the shell is not the meat, and that the meat is not the shrimp, although it cannot spell the names we have given to each. How does it know? It realizes the thing itself instead of merely its name. To realize is to make real, and whether we seek the inner life or the outer, we should make our world more real through feeling it, through coming in actual touch with it. I have seen a simple soul filled with a joy and peace which a brighter intellect might envy and seek in vain. This simpler soul had found in touch that which no argument reveals, and no process of reasoning brings closer to the perception. Does it require an argument to prove to you that you exist? Can any word or series of words convey to you the fact of your existence? No. You simply feel that you exist. You may have reached that feeling through a long line of experiences in which thought played an important role. Still, the result of it all is feeling just the same, and that feeling is realization. Starting with a realization of your own being, which realization you possess now, is it so difficult a matter to extend that realization and see that being of yours widen and widen until it exceeds all your past conceptions? Can you not imagine yourself on the inner side, opening into the deeps of infinity as a river opens into the sea? To think about it will aid you in believing it possible, but the only thing which will make it real is to reach out, as does the anemone, with the tentacles of your spirit in order to feel or experience or touch that which you seek. That and that alone is realization. I have said again and again that thought without feeling avails nothing in the establishment of health and happiness. I cannot emphasize that fact too strongly, for it is all important in the attainment of improved mental and physical conditions. Feeling is of the heart, and the heart is the center of life. From it proceed the issues of life. We make a distinction between a hearty welcome and a merely civil one. The words used in the welcome may be exactly the same, but in the former there is feeling, and in the latter there is none. And why do we say hearty? Because it comes from the heart and is full of life or feeling. Let me illustrate more fully. Not long ago, I had a business transaction with a person who claimed 25 more than I believed was her due. The result was an argument in which neither was convinced. I positively knew that I had justice on my side, and so one day I sat down at my desk in a judicial mood. I felt every fiber of my being hardening in the interest of strict justice, and I dipped my pen in ink to write page after page in justification of my position. Suddenly, the thought came to me that this person needed the 25 badly. Instantly, my mood softened, and I wrote, "Dear whoever you are, right or wrong, the 25 is yours. Here is my check for the amount. Yours with love." The most delicious happiness came upon me. A delightful electric vibration passed from my head down through my body. It was as though a hand of blessing had been laid upon my head, and the delight of it was beyond description. A heavenly benediction certainly descended upon my spirit, and it was worth 1,000 times the paltry 25. But why did I say, "You are right, the 25 is yours"? Simply because I felt that somewhere in the subconscious stratum of our natures, there is registered a different account from that which shows upon the pages of our daybooks and ledgers. In that subconscious account, it may be seen that some of the things that seem to belong to us really belong to others. The heart may know more than the mind does about this hidden account, and in that case, feeling can move us to the deepest, truest ends of justice. Had I said, "You are wrong, but I will send you the money to end the controversy," I should have placed a canker in my note that would have eaten out the joy it was to carry to that other heart. I speak of this to show the difference between thought and feeling. I thought the 25 belonged to me, but I felt that it belonged to the one who needed it more than I did. Who shall say that this prompting of my heart was not a forecast of that day of brotherhood when we shall not draw hard and fast lines about ourselves, our rights, and our possessions? If we desire the pulsing life from the heart of the universe, we must become one with it, and we cannot become one with it while we shut our brothers from our hearts. When I made the interest of another my own and covered her need with my supply, the spirit of love gave me benediction. In fulfilling the law of love, more life was poured upon me, for the law of life is love. The diagram at the head of this lesson is a flower. It as truly represents a radiant center as does the star, as you will see if you examine it. It was suggested by these lines in Edward Carpenter's Love's Coming of Age. He speaks of his belief in a society to which we all, in our inmost selves, consciously or unconsciously belong. The rows of souls that Dante beheld in paradise, whose every petal is an individual, and an individual only through its union with all the rest. The early church's dream of an eternal fellowship in heaven and on earth, the prototype of all the brotherhoods and communities that exist on this or any planet. The innumerable selves of men, united in the one self, members of it and one another like the members of one body, stand in eternal and glorious relationship, bound indissolubly together. In concluding these lessons, I have changed the diagram from the star to the flower because I wish to throw a more definite and living beauty into the conception of oneness. While the star radiates life in the form of light, this is not fully expressed in a purely geometrical design. Nothing appeals to the heart and stirs it to new life like an organized form of beauty, and the thought of unfolding like a flower from the center of divinity must be an incentive to better and more beautiful living. The form, the color, the aroma of a flower delight us through the senses, it is true, but at the same time, there is a subtle and unrecognized appeal to the inner life. The still, small voice of divinity is really saying through the flower, "Behold me in this, my symbol. I am at the center, and I am at the circumference. I am God at the center of the rose. I am man in its petals, and beside me there is none." To feel this, dear friend, is the first step in realization. It is not so difficult a thing. We are accustomed to look upon the things external as real, the things that can be seen and touched, whereas it is the unseen that is real. We have developed senses by which we see and touch these external things, and it remains for us to develop finer senses by which we feel the inner things. A seer once said, "The things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." Realization means to draw the externalized consciousness back to the center where it touches or is conscious of the spirit of power. It means to remain calm and serene at the center while also reaching out in healthful activity. To find this place in consciousness, so peaceful, so masterful, so creative, so blessed, is the entire end and aim of these lessons. With my whole soul, I believe there is no need for unhappiness, for failure, for poverty, or disease. I as fully believe that the day is at hand when every soul shall recognize its own divinity and dwell in majesty at the center of being, controlling circumstances and radiant with life and power. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation, and please remember to subscribe to receive notifications of upcoming recordings.